Welcome to Real Lives with Angry Soccer Mom and Coach Tim.
Hey.
Hi, Tim.
How you doing?
How's it going?
Hey, I'm fine, but I'm still black in America.
I'm still white and privileged and don't have to think a lot about it. Welcome to our live show. Each week, we're going to highlight topics surrounding America's culture of white supremacy. And our goal is to get people talking. Before I talk about today's topic, I wanted to reintroduce Tim kind of formally to people who might not know him.
Yeah.
So,
well, hey, my name is Tim, and I'm going to be coaching this segment today. And I run a nonprofit organization called Shift Community Resource. And what we do is we help folks who are coming out of incarceration with job employment. We help them with getting their driver's license. We work with them in securing housing. And we're applying for this huge grant now so that we can build new housing for folks who can't normally get housing because of their background. Kim, tell me, what are you angry about today?
Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to be very upfront and real. I'm pissed off because there's so many ignorant white folks who are falling for Trump's con job. We need to all start talking about this in a heterogeneous setting, so that we can just get comfortable talking about race in America. So today we're going to discuss two very important cases of injustice and Trump's involvement in them. So the first one is the iconic case of Emmett Till from 1955, which has been just reopened, fairly recently by Trump's Department of Justice under Jeff Sessions. They reopened it. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of that. And the second one is the Central Park 5 case from 1989. How did these cases impact your life and how you felt? Some people were alive at the time. Most of the audience was alive at the time.
Well, I'm going to chime in on that a little bit because I watched your video on Emmett Till, and I thought it was one of the most interesting videos I've seen. You've done great research, and I really like that. And so folks who haven't seen that, if you can go to Angry Soccer Mom, that's on YouTube, and look at your Emmett Till video. It was impactful. So I think and when you go to her video and you watch that, please subscribe to her YouTube site. So that's what I have. That's my little piece right there.
Thank you, Tim. The Emmett Till case was about a 14-year-old African-American boy, very young, who was accused of offending a white woman. And as retribution, he was abducted, tortured, and murdered. It was 1955. And the Emmett Till case came just after a huge Supreme Court case called Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. That was 1954. And what it did was, this case was huge. It brought down separate but equal education in America, and it made school segregation illegal. So there was a lot going on. Obviously, the South was probably, the culture of that. They weren't thrilled, obviously. But just to give you a feel for the time, I've been studying this, and the more I read, it's unbelievable. Tim, I read this stuff. I was reading some of the Jim Crow laws that were still absolutely in effect. I mean, the school thing, they couldn't do anymore. But the Jim Crow law I read about that impacted me by, just wow, was that it was a crime to simply discuss or argue in favor of social equity and social equality or intermarriage of whites. Literally, if you were caught talking about it. I mean, that's like free speech, dude. Right. That's like, what?
Right.
But that's, that I double checked it because I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But I guess the state can do that.
Yeah. And I think some states just kind of removed that from the book. So you might have to do a little research on that. And we also remember the Loving family in Virginia, that wanted to get married. So that kind of brings that back.
They were
imprisoned. They were in prison. Well, their children are now telling this story. So you have the Loving son going out there telling, the folks the way their lives were under those Jim Crow laws. Living back to Emmett Till, we also have a culture of something called white tears. And you know, when white women cry and call 911, the police come. Okay. And when they come, somebody's getting handcuffed. Somebody might even go to jail. And it's little things. Someone broke into my car and I called the cops and they said, you know what? That's not an emergency. You need to dial a non-emergency number. So when you hear stories like Barbecue Betty and all these folks calling the cops for these, you know, lemonade stands, you would think that these were non-emergencies. But apparently because they're white women making the report, the police show up. And it's unbelievable. You know, so when you say white people don't have a clue, is maybe they do have a clue, knowing that the police will support whatever they have to say, regardless of
they have that clue.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
the
thing.
They know that they can get the police to beat us up. Yeah.
I mean, they don't have a historical clue or a modern perspective of you know, racial history in America and modern time, but that they have a clue of.
Okay.
That and that's, and I gotta say, it's purposeful. It seems like every time people of color or African Americans, Black people, Indigenous people start going up and raising their status and doing really, really well, the white establishment, the systemic white supremacy, propaganda, just the culture shifts, and it is purposeful.
Right.
It's really purposeful. Let's fast forward to the Central Park Five, and the woman who had this, you know, the woman who was a victim, she has no memory of it, but let me give you a quick summary. In 1989, a young Donald Trump was living in New York City. At the time, news was spreading quickly of a horrific, brutal sexual assault and near killing of a white woman who was an investment banker, and she was jogging in Central Park, and she was brutally attacked. The 5 young men, now known as the Central Park Five, were picked up as suspects, and they were 5, you know, really young teens from 14 to 16, 5 African-American and Latino kids, and not a single one of them had ever been arrested for anything, but they weren't allowed to have counsel or their parents present when they underwent investigation. And despite their DNA not being a match, them not having a criminal record, them not having their parents or lawyers, they confessed. They were, you know, forced to, and that was in a day. And I don't know if a lot of people maybe remember, there was a ton of pressure to make sure somebody paid for that crime. And Donald Trump wasn't even a politician at the time, and he had no additional knowledge of the details of the case, but he took it upon himself to spend, in today's money, it would have been like $175,000, putting 4 full-page ads in the newspapers in New York City, advocating for the death penalty and pretty much canning the jury pool, if there was one, you know, just talking up. He had the audacity basically to act as judge, jury, and prosecutor in the court of public opinion. And these kids didn't stand a chance. They just didn't. They were not executed, but they were sentenced to long prison terms. And the public was satisfied. And after years, they grew up and became men, and they had their lives destroyed. Their parents passed away, some of them. I mean, and finally, the real killer was identified. A man who was in prison, actually, for a different crime, completely different crime, admitted to being the attacker of the jogger, and his DNA was a perfect match. So
incredible.
You know, the crazy thing is, even when these kids, I mean, these men were acquitted, I mean, they didn't do anything, and you know, they had lawsuits, and it was awful. They had their lives ruined. Donald Trump went on television and said he denied their innocence publicly, and he still does to this day. And he said they did it, so they did it.
Wow.
I know, it's literally unbelievable.
Incredible.
That he would double down, triple down, quadruple down. I mean, my God. I mean, it's like a personal vendetta, and he had nothing to do with the case. So That's one of the first things I actually heard about Donald Trump when he was starting to run. I didn't know anything about him really. So.
Well, I grew up in New York City, Kim, and
yeah.
and I was in the Army in 1989, and I remember seeing Donald Trump at P. Diddy parties. For those of you who don't know P. Diddy, he's a rapper, and so we all used to ask ourselves, what is he doing at a P. Diddy party? And we all knew that the now president was always a con artist. He's just conning other people now. And and there was a record also that came out that year by a group called Public Enemy. They were more or less an activist group, and they made a record called Don't Believe the Hype. And the hype was widespread during that time about these young men. And it just created this culture of fear of Black people and young Black men especially. And it came to the point in 1995 when during the OJ trial. And I remember they were having OJ parties because we all wanted to see if he was going to be acquitted. Because historically we were used to having lynching parties when people of color committed crimes or were suspected of committing crimes. You were going to get the modern day lynching, and that is either imprisonment or or even death row or execution. And if
can I jump in?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
1 second. I just keep that thought because I want you to. But I wanted to say and I don't obviously speak for all white people, but I know a lot of white people believe that lynchings are, this horrible, horrible thing, but I get this feeling that they don't know just exactly how horrible. And I want to just kind of tell them, not in detail, but people brought their families. They were literally parties. There sometimes were invitations. They took souvenirs. I mean, I'm talking like effing sick. I mean, not just like, I don't want to go into it, but I mean, I've been reading and reading. This was purposeful, not just to take the life, but to send a cultural message. Said, we have control. You might be free, but you're not that free because we're going to, this is what we're going to do. I mean, talk about it's like terrorists. So I get this feeling like a lot of folks don't realize, like, think about how, I don't know, think about it. But anyway, go ahead. So I just had to jump in there.
No, not at all. No, it's it is kind of a form of terrorism. In the Black community, we have something called Willie Lynch. The form of terrorism that lasts over decades and generations of young people and peoples. And so we're supposed to be coming to a close of the Willie Lynch era, and we're coming into an era to where Blacks are now kind of stepping forward. They're using their voice. They're using whatever power we have. And but getting back to OJ, I remember when he was acquitted. For some reason, I've never felt such a relief to see a Black man acquitted of, we know it was a murder trial, but he was acquitted for killing a white woman. And for some reason, on one side of my mind, it was amazing. And it wasn't anything like retribution. It was more of a relief that finally we can go to the criminal justice system and get a verdict in Black men's favor. Because we didn't look at OJ as, an individual getting tried. We looked at OJ as one of our sons. Even if our son is on death row, we still love him. So we looked at OJ as that. And he was acquitted, and we all celebrated the fact that he can get the same justice as a white man would get, in that position. But of course, he had the dream team. He had,
he had the money
to back him up. Because if he was an impoverished Black person, he would have gotten executed if there was a death penalty in the state of California. And we know that. But still in all, we know if we can get to a position in America that there's a possibility that we can get justice and that we can get a fair shake So this is what we're looking for. Okay, just that fairness in the criminal justice system, which seems to elude us all the time.
Well, it was, I remember when the verdict came out, and it was such a, I was torn personally. I was, you know, like, I want liberty and justice for all to actually mean something in this country. I want every single person, no matter what their economic status is, no matter what their, you know, supposed race is, to have, you know, blind justice, I guess you could say. But we don't even have remotely close to that. And at the time, I remember thinking, well, everybody in the white community, I can't speak for everybody, but I mean, it was, oh, he did it. And, you know, I can remember if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. I mean, they're like, people in LA, I was living in LA at the time, and the people were like saying that. And it was crazy, because on one hand, people really did think he did it in the white overall. But I personally, another person not getting justice, or it's just, I don't think people of color can get a fair trial in America. It's just my opinion, unless they have tons and tons of money. I mean, I'm sure they do, but in general, you know, systemic racism is just pervasive, you know?
Yeah, that's true. But it creates a climate of almost revolution. And it creates a climate to where, you know, pretty soon we're just not going to take it anymore. And we're going to burn this bitch down, because we have to find a way to start all over, or at least start the conversation. But, you know, poor peoples of the planet throw revolutions, you know, constantly. But we only have these things when something goes on within our city, some young man gets shot, you know, and that brings me to Rodney King. I remember there were riots in Compton, and I think you taught there for a while. So I hope you bring up some of that, because this was before the O.J. Simpson trial. So you already had it. It was already in the air, you know, are we going to continue on taking this? And then we got O.J. after that. But if you could just kind of share with us, Kim, because I think you taught in California, I would really like to know how you navigated that.
Yeah, I navigated it blindly. It's a great question. I navigated it blindly, and it's probably like for the best for me at the time. You know, idealism and naivete, my specialty. You know, so yeah, right around this era, I was working as a 4th, 5th grade public school teacher in Compton, California, and at the time, Compton, it was my first real job. At the time, Compton boasted the highest murder rate for small towns in the country. And it was known for that. And it was really, really a tough area overall. There was tons of tension at the time, but because I was so naive, I thought that was just kind of normal. I thought, I guess this is how it is. Our school, personally, this one little square block was in jeopardy of being taken over by the state because of things that had gone on previously before I'd gotten there. So, I mean, we were being watched by the state to have a takeover. The last year I was there, and that was the year of the riots, was 7 shootings in our teeny little square block of where my school was. And what it was is you'd hear gunfire, and I don't know if people are familiar with this kind of thing, but you hear gunfire in the classroom, and you're like praying it's like a backfire, some car or something, but you can tell it's gunfire. And the kids hear it, and you hear it, and they sound an alarm, and you follow protocol and make sure you count all your kids, you make sure they're down. My kids would never duck, though, because they'd say, "Oh, we do this all the time, we're fine." I'm like, "Come on, guys, I'm supposed to be in charge of you, get down." Like, they thought it was like a joke, and I was like, "Please get down." You know, it's just like crazy. And 7 times in a 8-month period, where you could, I mean, shooting in the neighborhood, you could actually hear it. And the gang activity was, the Crips and the Bloods were really, you know, big there. And it wasn't something you couldn't see. It was You could just see, oh, that guy was probably a gang member. They were doing their signs, wearing their stuff. I mean, it was pretty open. So I remember one time I took the end of the year, just before the riots. I took my fifth graders. It was like this big event. My kids were going to go to the middle school and get to see like their new school because they were moving up. And so, you'd go for a visitation. And we got there, and we weren't there for 3 minutes. But the police, all these police kind of like came around us and said, we have to leave now. And they just, I was taking the kids. It was just me and all the fifth graders. And they said, you have to leave now. And so they said, we can't guarantee your safety. And I was like, stupid me. But my kids need to see the school. I'm like, okay. So, I mean, the climate was ripe. The riots stemmed from the acquittal of 4 white Los Angeles Police Department officers who were videoed beating Rodney King, who was a black motorist in 1991. And they pretty much almost killed him. And it was unbelievable. When we came back after the riots, not the houses, but it's a criminal system of injustice. The entire, as you drove up the main drag to go to, the main street, Central Street, to go to your school, everything was on fire. Like, I thought this was all over with, because I didn't live there. I didn't have to deal with the fact that every, business is burnt down. I didn't have to deal with that. Their grocery store was gone. Their gas station wasn't usable. The riot was all over the place. And over the 5 days there were 50 people dead, 2,000 injuries. Riots destroyed 1,000 buildings, more than 9,800 National Guards were dispatched. And as I drove in, got fire on this side, fire on that side. They were letting it burn down. I don't know much about that, or if you do, but they apparently don't put them out. So I had National Guard people with their weapons out all over the place. It was like a war zone. And there were still small riots going on all over the place. But not the main, because the National Guard, 9,800 troops were there, and nearly 12,000 people were arrested. Not all related to the riots, but just, it was unbelievable.
Wow. Like, it kind of brings to mind Louisiana, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita, how they, said that the blacks were kind of refugees. They had National Guard, protecting, property, and rather than saving the people and rescuing them from their homes, they brought out the National Guard. And we were there at the time, and there was a colonel on ground, or general, major general, and he was telling the National Guard troops to put your weapons down because they were pointing their weapons at the civilians, right? Like they were intruding into the country, like they were an occupier. And he said, put those weapons down right now.
It looked like a war zone where I was.
Right.
Like, I'd never been in a war zone, but it sure looked like one.
But then you brought up the gang activity, how they would be, kind of prepared for the new students that would come in and terrorize them. Hillary Clinton called these young men super predators, and gave them this moniker that that black people are to be feared, and you should fear them and be afraid because they are super predators. Now tell that to law enforcement that you're dealing with super predators, because we're in America, we have the only law enforcement that everything looks like a gun. Cell phones, combs, anything that you might be walking looks like a gun. So, because they're dealing with super predators, and that's a real difficult thing to do. And Hillary said this during the making of the crime bill. And when they put the crime bill together, it brought out the 3 strike laws and things like that. So now people are going to jail for the rest of their lives because they stole a pack of cigarettes or they had something that looked like a crack pipe, or, you know, that they were in some activity where it looked like if though they were doing something, and they're serving life sentences because of that 3-strike law. And this all came around that period. And it was an interesting time. How could you explain to someone you're going to jail for 25 to life because you stole a pack of cigarettes? Okay, it's not imaginable. And the Black community really suffered from those 3-strike laws because they started putting them into drug laws. So if you had crack cocaine during that time, you know, and it was all during that era, you would get an automatic 15 years for 3 crack rocks and distributing the crack rocks. And the only reason why I know some of these things because I deal with folks coming out of incarceration, and because they were participants, they got long prison sentences when they were teens, and now they're coming out as adults with very little education, very little support, and it's our issue as Americans to help these people become citizens again. And that's white and Black. And if you can just educate our white viewers, Kimberly, it would really make an impact on the works we're trying to do. So,
well, you know what, Tim,
it's all on you. So remember that.
Oh, gee, thanks. Yeah. God, my friend Vaughn brought up an amazing point. The criminal justice system was not, and I was going to say this earlier, but I didn't want to jump in and interrupt. It wasn't built for Black Americans. It was built for white people, and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. For example, many people don't realize that the origins of the police in America, they came from slave catchers. They were the original groups of slave catchers, and then they became sheriffs. And as Vaughn says, thank you, Vaughn, the system wasn't built for everybody. So a lot of times I'll put in my videos, the system is working. It's working the way it was planned to work. And that's the problem with, and not trying to go off on a rant, but I like to do those, but I'm not trying to go off on a rant, but what's happening is exactly what's supposed to be happening. The system needs dismantling, not, let's all be nice to everybody and say we don't see color and we don't see this and that. It needs to be dismantled. The white perspective about the riots, as far as I knew, everybody I talked to about the riots, when, the Rodney King riots or the LA riots, people absolutely were dumbstruck. They're like, why would they burn their own place down, huh? Like, they don't, like, literally, they're like, that's pretty stupid. Like, they just didn't get it. They were so out of touch with the injustice. They just, literally were like, what? And nobody could explain it. There was no education. And people didn't understand when you get to a point, and maybe you can speak to that. I don't have answers, but all I know is when you have nothing left to lose and your own country that speaks of this wonderful liberty and justice for all, but has absolutely no intention of allowing it. I can't imagine. Year and centuries.
Well, I think it's an ingredient for revolution. It sounds big, but we thought that Trump wouldn't be president. That that sounds weird too. But it's an ingredient for revolution. So when people burn things down, you have to start all over. Okay. It's just that it doesn't become a jobs program for Black people. They bring in white contractors and they rebuild the community, and still the community doesn't participate. So we have to be deliberate in this country. If we're going to have some real race relations, we're going to have to be absolutely deliberate. I ran into a young man the other day, and I want to share this. And he was obviously Pakistani, and he was doing a part-time job. He was a doctor, and he was, interviewing for jobs, and he went to a hospital, and he said he went to this hospital because they hired Pakistanis. And they asked him, because of his last name, his father was Pakistani, but his mother was not. And so he did not get the job because they wanted people who were from Pakistan and who were Pakistani. And what I saw in that is that is deliberate. You want your medical staff to look one way, you hired that staff. And whether someone else was qualified or not, they were a hospital that hired people of Middle Eastern descent. And he just didn't have enough. And so he said they didn't hire him because of his last name. He had an American last name. And they asked him, was he full-blooded? And he said no. Is
that allowed?
That is not allowed, but they asked him the question anyway.
I think that's allowed.
Well, when you're looking for something, you ask the question, even if it's not legal. And being a black male, it's obvious, okay? And so for some reason, folks hire people that look like them, and the people who are in charge and who have the companies and the businesses are white. And if they don't let us in, most likely eventually we'll burn this shit down and we'll have to start all over. So, you know, and when I mean start all over, we're talking banking, housing, you name it, you know, redlining, because we can't live in certain neighborhoods, and that's real. We pretend it's not real, but it's absolutely real.
And we're gonna do a show on redlining.
Right.
Just redlining alone. It's
unbelievable. So in my thinking is, well, what do we do about that? Well, maybe we can start our own bank and give housing loans. And it comes to that.
That's something in the air.
But again, when it comes to that, our fear is that, and this is our fear, and our fear is that, well, we'll start a bank and we'll be audited, we'll be discredited, and as soon as we make a mistake, we'll be out of it.
Well, that's historical.
Right.
That's a historical reality.
Right. It's absolutely historical. And so that's one of our fears, because all of our great people, you know, that I found great growing up, like folks like Muhammad Ali, you know, he was a boxer here in the United States, but he was known worldwide for his activism. He was a black Muslim with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He changed his name from Cassius Clay to Ali. And he said he was not going to go to Vietnam and kill brown people. Well, white people didn't want to hear that. So the first thing they did was they took his championship from him. So he's no longer the heavyweight of the world. And they imprisoned him for that, or he did some jail time. And so they started a campaign on how to discredit him. But as soon as he got back, and as soon as he was released, and he was also exonerated, I think in 1971.
White America needs to educate themselves. Yes, it's painful. They feel guilty. They feel this. It's like, it's not about them. It's not about them. It's about watching a society that you're born into and saying, well, I was born into it and this is the way it is, and so I'm going to do nothing. Would you, I always say this, and I can't even find the right analogy. Would you walk by a person barely swimming in a pool and just be like, I didn't build the pool? Or would you walk by, you know, nobody's helping them, and you're thinking, I didn't shove them in? It's unfathomable. It's unconscionable to me. And I don't want people to do it out of guilt. I just want to do it. It's the right thing to do. I don't want to live in a country that boasts this liberty and justice for all bullshit when we absolutely have zero intention of following through with it. It wasn't built for that. And the propaganda alone is just, it's horrible. It's awful. So education in my mind is, I mean, I'm also, you know, like a teacher, but education is one of the ways.
You can make contact with people that don't look like you. And we make contact with people that don't look like us all the time. But we won't bring them to the house. We won't celebrate, we won't celebrate certain things with folk.
Now we're talking fake liberals.
Well, I know hundreds of fake liberals. You know, I do a lot of work with them, and I know they're going to show up, but and they're gonna say Umgawa Black Power, but they don't mean it.
Party.
Yeah, they don't mean it. And so when the awards go out, you know, they want to pick their black person, you know, so they'll pick their black person who makes them feel comfortable, who
I have a black friend.
right,
I
got a black friend.
Denial.
Right. So I have a white friend, I guess. But so that's where it is. So, we, maybe one day when we want to, get some revenue for the show, we can have shirts, go to lunch with a black person shirts, and we can sell those for $10.
Well, I know we were talking about
Yeah.
that because honestly, and this is my not so humble, maybe sort of arrogant opinion, what's stopping the segregation right now in America is pre-65, pre-1965. We are so segregated. White folks literally do not have a single, 3 out of 4 in this age, in today's date, 3 out of 4 white folks do not have a single close friend who isn't white. How would they know what's going on with racism? How would they know if someone's playing the race card? They don't even know how to identify racism. They think it's burning crosses and saying the N-word, and it's like, oh my God, like they have no idea of the history. But anyway, I could go on. I'm gonna kind of start to wrap. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this? Because I'm kind of like taking over. And what do you think? Do you have anything to add,
I think we ought to get the shirts together and start mass production, and hand the first 400 out for free, and try to start dealing with people you normally don't deal with, and then that way maybe we can kind of make this specter of fear and suspicion go away. And you know what?
You know what, Tim?
The crazy part about it, people know. All right. I mean, we've had wars. We had the Vietnam War, Korean War. People lived and worked together. I mean, tightly. I was in the military for 14 years, and I really enjoyed a lot of my time in the military because I got to hang out with people I normally would not hang out with. I got to sit and eat with people I know, and I really liked them. I thought they were genuine human beings. And I was in a leadership training course, and they pair you up. And that's the person that's going to make sure that you graduate. And so I was paired up with a gentleman, and he was, man, we had the best time of our lives. And then one night, because our bunks were near one another, he said, I have something to tell you. And I said, well, what is that? He said, well, I live in North Carolina, and you can't ever come to see me. And I said, why? Because he said, I'm in the KKK. And he had a card, and it was the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And his name was on it. And he gave me the card. And he said, that he really cared for me, and that, we were tight. And he asked me, do I understand that? So because we became friends in every way, I said, I understand. We can hang out now, but you grew up in that. So I tried to give him an out because, you're
making him feel comfortable.
Yeah, I wanted to give him an out because deep down, human beings are good on the inside, is what we are taught to be like. It's how people come together, and how whites create white spaces. We teach each other that. This is not automatic. I mean, if people of color and whites have gotten together in any kind of way, they'll see that they have a lot in common. Friendships will build up, relationships will build. But
you know what happens, Tim?
This is historical. So go ahead.
Well, yeah, and again, historically, you're right, and that's what the people who have the power do, is once they see them coming, closer together, they just throw in more propaganda. But what I started, one of my groups that I started on the online community was started just based on that tenet that friends don't let friends, get bullied, and friends don't let friends have injustice afforded to them and just do nothing. So let's start making some friends. So, one of my groups, as you know, is closed and a very specialized group. We bring people in from every walk of life. We're talking every, and we all become friends. And the segregation thing is so huge because I don't know if people really realize that being segregated, is a very purposeful, very, I don't know any of the word. It's purposeful. sometimes a conspiracy is a conspiracy. The reason that they didn't want, in the Emmett Till day, I was reading about this just yesterday. The rules were so harsh that you couldn't even talk about social justice. They did not want. They wanted to keep these people over here, purely black folks, these people purely whites, because when it gets mixed, it ruins their game, because race is made up. It's a human construct. There's no such thing. So then that messes them up when there's kids that are, kind of white but kind of black. They can't make these laws that destroy lives, because it's like, well, so I mean, it's a complex topic.
Totally.
Really complex.
Right.
Topic.
But it is very doable, and
becoming friends.
Right.
Just becoming friends.
And what I also noticed, because I lived outside the country for quite a while, and it kind of changes your attitude when it comes to people, and we realize that people aren't really what they seem. They are just a product of their environment.
Well, Tim, that's the third one, and I was going to keep it a secret.
Oh,
but, I'm just teasing.
Oh, okay.
I'm totally teasing. I'm joking.
Right.
That's the third. There are 3 proven, ways to research-wise that people can become less racist.
Right.
And one is becoming close friends with a person different than you. If you're white, or a person of a black person, person of color. Close friends, not just buddies, not your black friend, but
right.
Your actual very good friend. Traveling the world. Ta-da.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Traveling the world.
And
education.
And education. Right.
And other than that, there's not a lot of stuff proven.
Right.
So.
And there's another thing that really irks me, and I'm learning how to be better at it, is when I get around white people. And I'm the only black person there, it seems like I get into this automatic thing on making them feel comfortable with my presence, my black presence. And I realized a couple of months ago, that's a lot of work, okay? And so I'm at the point now, if you're not comfortable with me, oh, well, that's your business.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question
Please.
about that? And you don't have to,
I will answer.
You don't have to say it. Do you do that because in some small way you feel like if you could make maybe 1,000 people comfortable, then they would change their ideas, and then you want to you feel like the pressure to represent the black.
Absolutely.
Kind of pressure.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm representing the whole black community and black men.
Show them you're
right, and showing them that hey, we are decent people, and don't. But they get their decent people from the media and TV and movies. They talk about the Huxtables, and that's not real people. I'm real, and this is what you get, okay? And you get different opinions. I don't have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me, and we should be all right with that. But it's like, what kind of it's like they don't know what kind of food I eat, and I'm sitting these kind of things. So, and then I have to be able to translate black to white people so that they can feel comfortable.
And that's not your responsibility.
It's not my job.
That's not your.
It's not my job.
No.
I do not have to translate black from black, things to white things so that you can feel comfortable. But I felt that I was doing that, and I just recognized it a few months ago, and I'm like, that's weird. Why am I feeling this way? Why do I have this thought that I have to fit in? I don't have to fit
or let them fit.
Right, you got to
let them feel comfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then some folks try to make me fit in. They come with the weirdness. One gentleman came up to me and said, I have a black stepson. And I'm like, okay. I didn't know what to say. I thought that was okay for you.
Tim, my brother, sister's mother's friend's father knew someone who was black.
That's right.
I swear to God, it's like,
that's right.
Okay, wow, that makes you it's this white people do not, in general, obviously, they are so incredibly uncomfortable talking about racism. It's like they don't know what words to use. They don't know, they're offensive, and they don't know what to say. They don't even know the history. I mean, most of them, and it's it's so doable, and so you just have to care and educate yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you realize it, it changes your life. So yeah, it's interesting. There's so many topics we can talk about. I'm going to try to wrap it up for us here a little bit. Mm-hmm. I could stay here for, I'm sure I could stay here forever, because there's just so much. It's been a big conspiracy in my mind, a big conspiracy. So earlier you asked me what I'm angry about.
What are you angry about today? What is your problem?
I'm angry about a lot. I just think it's completely hypocritical of Trump trying to be this white savior to open up this case of, such great historical significance, and, kind of make it public. Well, all the while he's taking away, modern, current time, he's taking away the rights of historically marginalized people as much as he can. He's talking trash about them. He's spewing racist rhetoric. He's disparaging entire countries. And, like when he said, he makes me so angry, because people use this and say, you see, he's not racist, you see, because they refuse to delve into the real, they're saying surface level. And like when he was trying to pardon Muhammad Ali. Well, Muhammad Ali didn't need pardoning. So, but they don't know. So they take him at his word, and it's like he has his fools in his pocket. It's unbelievable.
It's the con game.
So, I mean, he is truly a con game. And that is why I'm mad. I mean, I'm mad about other things too, but so don't get me wrong. I think there is no case more deserving of closure and of some sort of justice than the Emmett Till case. But my big thing is, while he's at it, I'd like to see him maybe allow that same closure for whatever it's worth, which is, I don't know, for the Central Park 5. These men are alive. They're living here today. But, I mean, their lives have been destroyed as young teens with the help of the arrogant, racist Donald Trump. And it's just the hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is it's enraging. And I can't imagine, if it's enraging to me, how it feels to, I don't know.
It's just not good. It's not healthy. I feel like I'm walking around with PTSD all day. Yeah.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah.
I believe it. I have friends that won't. I have a couple friends, and not lots of friends, but I kid you not. Yeah. They don't want to leave their house.
Yeah. Well, Baldwin said, if you're black and you're conscious and you live in America, it's like walking around in a constant rage.
Yeah. And then, but you can't be. You can't be, because God forbid somebody looks at you as the angry black man. So it's like you can't win. You can't win.
I'm going to be the angry black man, but I don't think I'm going to shoot up any schools or restaurants or,
another live show.
That's a whole different show, but yeah,
that's a white person
I can be enraged and still function. So, and
right.
as long as we have discussion and I stay connected.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Tim, and people watching, I'm getting a little bit better about bringing in, questions and stuff, but thank you so much, Tim, and everybody who is watching. And say hi to Neil and Vaughn, and I was just saying to everybody, you're gonna be like, be quiet, lady. Right. But I can't thank you enough. We're gonna do this again on Sunday, and we're hoping, and I promise I will get better at fielding questions and getting them, because I want this to be not me talking. I want it to be everybody, a discussion.
Absolutely. And we're going to have a lot of music next week, so it's going to be kind of noisy on the other side.
Oh, it's live. Yeah, it's live.
Right. And we'll be at the Ethnic Fest, and it's always a wonderful show. Mm-hmm.
It's, it's sort of funny is between you and I talking and people participating, I'm going to go and write down about 10 new topics for our live show. Right. We have to start talking about race in America, mm-hmm. and not just with all people of color, separate from all people. White people need to suck it up and listen. and learn and educate themselves with, as uncomfortable as it might be. They truly care. They won't die. They might feel like they're dying, but they're not going to die. So, all right.
Okay.
Well, we'll close it. Thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks for letting me coach.
See you next week.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's awesome. Thank you guys so much. And PM me if you have any questions or comments or anything. All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, you guys.